The Buccaneers outmatched and outplayed the Giants from the jump. That and more on today's episode of Locked On Bucs.
You are Locked On Buccaneers, your daily Tampa Bay Buccaneers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, and welcome into this live post-game reaction episode of Locked On Bucs, your daily podcast covering the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I want to thank you for making Locked On Bucs your first listen review every day. Don't forget you can subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. And, of course, you can follow along on Twitter. I am James Yarcho, at JYarcho_Bucs, here with you every Monday through Friday, along with the everydayers. And for that, I want to share my appreciation for your continued support of the show. One of the ways you can support the show is become a Locked On Bucs insider. You're going to get news, rumors, updates, general thoughts, one-on-one conversations with me via text message. Go to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnBucs or click the link in the show notes to become an insider today. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet, and you're going to get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Biggest takeaways and game balls coming up in a little bit, but let's start with the biggest moment in this game. And honestly, it's kind of hard to choose. I mean, when you really think about the way this game played out, it was never really in doubt. There was no defining moment where the Bucs got a pivotal stop or a pivotal conversion or anything like that, because the Bucs really just dominated from the moment the game started. So I'm going to go with the Bucs being aggressive early on and going for it on 4th and 1 from the Giants' 28-yard line. Sean Tucker was stopped on 3rd and 1, and the Bucs had a decision. Todd Bowles had a real decision to make. You kick the 45-yard field goal with wind gusts up to 30 miles an hour to try to take a small early lead, or go for it and set the tone. They chose the latter, and it worked. Now, if the Bucs get stopped there, if Sean Tucker is taken down and does not convert on 4th and 1, that gives New York a lot of momentum and a lot of confidence early in the game. Instead, Tucker gets the first down to the 25-yard line. Then it's pass to Bucky for 2 yards. Rachaad runs for 8 yards. Mayfield passes to Bucky for another 14 yards. And Sean Tucker comes back onto the field with Vita Vea as the lead blocker. And boom, the Bucs are in the end zone. That set the tone for the rest of the game. The Bucs were going to do what they wanted when they wanted. Run, pass, didn't matter. The Giants were outmatched in every facet of the game, in every level, at every position. That was the moment. Everyone knew it was going to be a long day for those Giants fans in attendance in the Meadowlands. Yes, the next drive, they were forced to punt. Evans got 13 yards on first down, and then things fizzled a bit. But after that, the Bucs scored on 4 consecutive drives. Field goal, Bucky touchdown, Baker touchdown, Rachaad touchdown. That was as dominant a performance as we've seen from the Bucs as a whole since the Eagles game. The Bucs won that game 33-16. They led by as much as 24 points. Hurts was sacked 6 times in that game. DeVito was sacked 4 times in this game. Baker had 347 and 2 passing touchdowns with 1 on the ground in that one. He finished just shy of 300 passing touchdowns with a rushing touchdown in this one. The Bucs won the time of possession by 13 minutes against Philadelphia. They won by 13 minutes against the Giants. That was a complete team victory in every sense of the term, and those are the kinds of wins that the Bucs have to stack up moving forward. The big concern, though, were the injuries that the Bucs sustained against the Giants. Joe Tryon-Shoyinka left in the first half with an ankle injury, did not return. Then late in the game, Jordan Whitehead made a one-arm tackle on Tommy DeVito as he was trying to get into the end zone, and he immediately grabs the side of his chest near his armpit, ran off the field. He was instantly ruled out with a pectoral injury, so we're going to have to wait on the severity of that, but you hope it isn't a tear. If Whitehead tore his pec, his season is done. A partial grade 2 tear take 6 to 12 weeks to recover from. A fully torn pectoral is going to require surgery, and he would be out for 4 to 6 months. We're obviously hoping that it was just a strain, maybe a spasm, something to that effect. Or, maybe it's just something that's going to cause him to miss a week or two at the most. This Buccaneer secondary cannot take any more long-term injuries. Now, if Whitehead does miss time, I would expect Christian Izien to get the start at safety in his place, with Tyke Smith likely coming back next week. Or the Bucs could start Troy Hill at slot corner. Todd Bowles talked about he's a guy that can play outside and inside, and then still put Christian Izien at safety. Yes, they do now have Mike Edwards, but Edwards and Whitehead are very different players. They are not exactly interchangeable. Izien getting the start with Edwards doing what he did on Sunday would be more of what the Bucs wanted to do moving forward with Jordan Whitehead as the starter. You saw how much more active Antoine was in the game as a pass rusher, crashing the box on third downs, flying all over the field. That's what the Buccaneers want to do. So it would make sense to me for Izien to take over for Whitehead if he misses time, while Antoine and Edwards continue to play the roles that we saw them play on Sunday. Hopefully, we're going to have an update about Whitehead and JTS on tomorrow's show. Hopefully, neither guy is dealing with anything serious that is going to cause them to miss significant time. Want to jump over to the chat real quick, see what you guys are saying about the big Buccaneers win. Demon Hunter says, can we give School his flowers? He played a heck of a game. Yes, absolutely. School did really, really well. You guys know that I was concerned about what he was going to be able to do, having to go up against Kayvon Thibodeaux, having to go up against Brian Burns with those guys moving around. But School did an absolutely phenomenal job. Really, the only time that School got beat was when Kayvon Thibodeaux beat him around the edge and then had a late hit on Baker in his lower back. It went uncalled. And then that was, I believe, the second play of the Bucs' 95-yard touchdown drive that was capped off with Rachaad White. I think it was Rachaad White that got into the end zone on that drive. But yeah, that was really the only time that School got beat in this game. He really did play a heck of a game. Fausto in the chat says, would have liked to have seen more of Mike Evans. And I was talking to a longtime everydayer, Matt from Morven, Georgia. You guys remember him from when I used to be able to do all those voicemails. And he was getting frustrated about Mike Evans' lack of usage. And here's the thing. I'm not worried about Mike Evans only having 68 yards. That was actually a pretty solid game. You have to look at the game script. The Bucs were not going to go out of their way to continue to force him the ball with such a gigantic lead. They were playing the clock game. They were running the ball effectively with Bucky especially, but they were also running somewhat effectively with Rachaad and Sean Tucker. They wanted to keep the ball on the ground. They wanted to continue to chew up clock. If Mike Evans had only had 20 or 30 yards, I would be concerned. His 1,000-yard streak is still very much in play. Remember, he only has to average 95 yards per game. So he got 68 in this one. If he hits 122 in the next game against the Carolina Panthers, which he certainly has had his blow-up games against the Panthers in the past, now you're still on track. So 68, while it wasn't quite as much as we were all hoping for, it's still, enough to continue to keep that streak in play. It's a 20-yard performance, a 25-yard performance, a 30-yard performance that is going to make that much harder to attain. 68 yards, I'm fine with it. The game script kind of played him out of it, even late in the game. When the Bucs were on offense, Mike Evans was not on the field very often, and that was completely fine. Against the Panthers, I expect him to have a much larger role than he did in this one. I feel like that game is going to be a little bit closer, especially with the Panthers, taking it down to the wire against the Kansas City Chiefs. The Panthers are playing pretty well over the course of the last couple of weeks. So division game, a rising Panthers team, that one's going to be a lot tougher than this Giants game was. Going to talk about my biggest takeaways on both sides of the ball. That is coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Bucs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. History, economics, the great works of literature, the meaning of the U.S. Constitution. Did you study these things in school? Probably not. Or even if you did, maybe it's time for a refresher. Time and technology have changed a lot of things, but they have not changed basic fundamental truths about the world and our place in it. Our sponsor, Hillsdale College, is offering more than 40 free, yes, free online courses, including Constitution 101, the meaning and history of the Constitution, Introduction to Free Market Economics, the rise and fall of the Roman Republic, and a personal favorite of mine, Mark Twain, Tom Sawyer, Huckleberry Finn, and selected short stories. All of Hillsdale's courses are self-paced so that you can start whenever and tune in wherever. Plus, you can go deeper with readings, quizzes, discussions, or just kick back and enjoy the lectures. Go right now to hillsdale.edu/lockedon to enroll. There's no cost and it's easy to get started. That's hillsdale.edu/lockedon to register. hillsdale.edu/lockedon. PrizePicks is America's #1 daily fantasy sports app with over 5 million active members. It's the easiest, most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports because unlike other apps on PrizePicks, it's just you against the numbers. You can now win up to 100 times your money on PrizePicks with as little as 4 correct picks. It's the only real money daily fantasy platform with an injury insurance policy so that your lineups stay in play even if one of your players leaves in the first half and doesn't return. PrizePicks puts their members first, so all withdrawals are fast, safe, and secure. When my picks hit, I can get my money in as quickly as 15 minutes. Download the PrizePicks app today and use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly when you play $5. That's code LOCKEDONNFL, all lowercase, all one word, on PrizePicks to get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. PrizePicks, run your game. Thank you again for making Locked On Bucs your first listen review every day. The new Locked On NFL is here, and it's 2 shows every day. You got the madman Tyler Rowland kicking off your morning with a double shot of NFL espresso. Then stop by the barbershop with Tony Wiggins for some real NFL talk. Add in the Locked On local experts, and you get unprecedented NFL insight, hot opinions, detailed breakdowns, all in 30 minutes. It's the new Locked On NFL, and it's twice a day, so make it your second listen at the new Locked On NFL on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. My biggest takeaway on the offensive side of the ball, keep feeding Bucky. Bucky Irving was unbelievable in this game. 18 touches for 151 yards and a touchdown. Probably should have had 2. It was really frustrating to see him get down to the 1-yard line, inside the 1-yard line on 2 different occasions, and then not get the call to finish what he started. But regardless of that, career high 87 rushing yards on 12 carries. That's 7.3 yards per carry. A career high 64 receiving yards on a career high 6 receptions. That's 10.7 yards per reception. He had a career high 56-yard carry. He was the engine that made this car run on Sunday. I talked about it on Friday. And for those that saw my appearance on the Blitz with Evan Klosky and David Shealy on 10 Tampa Bay, I mentioned it there. If the Bucs are going to make a run and get to the postseason, Bucky Irving is going to be a big reason for that. And it's not that Rachaad was bad. He was off the field a lot in this game, but he had 3 carries on the opening drive, averaging almost 5 yards per carry. Then we didn't see him again until the end of the first half. He finished with 37 rushing yards on 12 carries, just 1 catch for 10 yards, did get a touchdown. I just don't think he ever got the chance to really get into a rhythm or get a feel for the game in this particular matchup. Bucky was so good and so effective that the Bucs truly did ride the hot hand. But then again, you also have to wonder, did Rachaad land in Bowles' doghouse for some reason? After Bucky came off the field following that 56-yard run where all of a sudden out of nowhere, Baker Mayfield is sprinting down the field to block for him. We were talking about it in the chat before the show started. How many starting NFL quarterbacks are going to race down the field and try to be a lead blocker for their running back. The only one that we could come up with in the chat was Baker Mayfield. But when Bucky came off the field to catch his breath after that run, it was Sean Tucker that went out there for him. It wasn't like that was a goal line situation or a short yardage situation. That should have been Rachaad territory, but instead it goes to Tucker. Now, I was thrilled to see Tucker getting involved. I've been screaming about it for months. I even waved the white flag on Friday saying I wouldn't believe it until I saw it. We finally saw it, but I was just left scratching my head a little bit about the utilization of Rachaad in this one. Having said all that, I think it was made very clear, very evident today that Bucky is going to be your primary running back the rest of the way. He is going to get the vast majority of carries, the vast majority of touches, and the opportunities moving forward. Again, 18 touches in this game for Bucky Irving. Rachaad and Tucker combined for 18. So Bucky had 50% of all running back touches in this game. He outgained the other two by 94 total yards. And that's going to be skewed a little bit because Tucker could literally only gain 1 yard on one of his touches, which he did when he got into the end zone, thanks to a lead block from Vita Vea. But that's a pretty drastic difference between Bucky Irving and the rest of the running backs on this roster. So the Bucs are going to lean on that kind of production for the rest of the season. And that means the Bucky Irving is going to be the primary guy for the Bucs in all of these games moving forward. My big takeaway on the defensive side of the ball is quite simply more of that, please. And the defense was outstanding. The pass rush was fantastic in this game. Tommy DeVito, I almost called him Danny DeVito. I would have felt bad. Tommy DeVito was sacked 4 times. He was hit numerous times. He was constantly under duress. Cansey was getting in the backfield. Diaby had a really impressive game. Antoine was causing problems. Vita was Vita. This was the kind of pass rush that the Bucs have desperately needed this season, and they've only had it in a few games. I talked about the Philly game. That was one of those games where the pass rush was just all over the quarterback. The Bucs are top 10 in sacks in the NFL, but it sure doesn't feel that way. On Sunday, they showed what they're actually capable of. They still get Bryce Young twice, Gardner Minshew, Derek Carr, Justin Herbert, and then whoever the heck is starting for the Cowboys when that game happens to roll around. But this is a team that can easily average 3 sacks a game the rest of the way. Again, average them, not saying that they're for sure getting 3 sacks in every single game, but getting an average of 3 per game is going to make a huge difference down the stretch. Even just the pressures that they brought put DeVito in a bad situation with long down and distances throughout the game. The defense forced 2 3-and-outs in this game. They had 2 drives where the Giants only ran 4 plays, and they forced New York into 5 third and 8 or longer situations, and the Giants converted just 1 of them. They didn't allow a 3rd down conversion until the second half, and all of it was due to relentless pressure that the Bucs defense showed in their pass rush. Next week, they are going against an offensive line that has allowed just 18 sacks this season. So that's less than 2 per game. So the challenge is going to be a lot tougher than it was against New York. The Bucs have to find a way to replicate the level of pressure and those types of results that they showed in New York when they travel to Carolina next week. If they're going to be as dominant as they were on Sunday, a lot of that is going to hinge on the ability of the pass rush. Kansas City has one of the best defenses in the NFL, and they only got to Bryce Young twice on Sunday. Diaby, Cansey, Vita, Braswell, Antoine, all of those guys are going to have to step up their game next week if they are going to have this level of impact against Dave Canales and Bryce Young in that Carolina offense. Going to jump into the chat again. I did see a comment. Oh, goodness, if I can find it again. I think it was Danny that said it. Said, where is Antoine Hempfield? I don't get it. He was our defensive MVP last year, and we barely call his name. Antoine had a huge impact in this game. I realize the stats don't show it, but I am going to talk more about Antoine in a little bit. But he was getting pressure. He was creating chaos in the backfield, like I talked about last week. He created a sack for Kalijah Cansey because of his blitzing, and he was able to play a little more free and a little more open than he has through much of the season. Antoine hasn't dropped off at all. It's been situational as to why we haven't called his name as much this year as we did last year, why he's not putting up the same kinds of stats. And it's because he's had to cover up a lot of defensive deficiencies because of how bad the secondary has been. On Sunday, he played much better, was called a lot more. You saw him more involved in a lot of plays. So don't worry about Antoine. He's still him field, and he's still going to be making quite a few plays for this defense. Matt in the chat says, do we have another running back / fullback in Vea? It's not the first time we've seen Vita Vea line up in the backfield for the offense as a lead blocker. I don't know if he's going to get any carries. I think he has one in his career in the NFL anyway. But that's a jumbo package that I really enjoyed seeing, having your big bruising back in the backfield in Sean Tucker, and then Vita Vea with the one paving the way and being his lead blocker. I want to see more of that as the season continues. That really makes those goal-to-go situations inside, the 1, the 2 yard line. That's when the Bucs are really going to be able to do some damage with that alignment. Want to see more of it. Demon Hunter, he says, I called him Danny DeVito, but I did it on purpose. He might have a career as a comedian because dude's a joke. Nah, I'm going to be nice to Tommy Cutlets. There was only so much he was going to be able to do in that one. And look, the Giants are not a good football team. Top to bottom, they are not a good football team. Malik Neighbors is incredible to watch. Tyrone Tracy has a really bright future, but this is a bad Giants team that's not on Tommy DeVito. He made a couple of really good plays in this game, but by then it was too little, too late. I would expect DeVito to, you know what? I'll call it right now. Tommy DeVito's getting a win on Thanksgiving Day against the Dallas Cowboys. We are handing out game balls for the first time in over a month. Start dropping yours in the chat. That's coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Bucs. Ready to tackle the NFL action on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. The Detroit Lions are now the Super Bowl favorites at plus 340. Then the Chiefs at plus 500, Bills at plus 650, Ravens at plus 700, and the Eagles flying up the ranks, now sitting at plus 700. Meanwhile, the Buccaneers are sitting at plus 12,000. Visit FanDuel.com to join today, and you're going to get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Wrapping things up here on a post-game live reaction episode following the Bucs' 30-7 win over the New York Giants, and it is time to hand out game balls. You guys might have forgotten how this works because it has been so long, but we hand out 2 game balls on each side of the ball. The top one is the overall player of the game, the golden game ball, if you will, and that one goes to Bucky Irving, as if there was any doubt at all. 87 yards on 12 carries, another 64 yards on 6 receptions, and a touchdown. He has 5 rushing touchdowns now on the season. That's the most by a rookie running back in the NFL. 577 rushing yards this season. That is second most in the NFL by a rookie running back. 10 yards behind the New York Giants' Tyrone Tracy. Just an absolutely dominant performance by Bucky Irving, establishing himself as the Bucs' top running back the rest of the season. You absolutely love what you saw out of Bucky Irving in this one, and you want to see it continue, especially against some of these defenses that the Bucs are going to be facing. Game ball number 2, Lavonte David. Have not mentioned his name yet in this episode, but He gets my overall top defensive player game ball in this one. A huge stop by Lavonte David on 4th and 1 early in this game when the Giants decided to go for it on 4th down, try to steal some of the momentum from the Bucs, and it did not work. Then, as they were marching down the field, gaining some of that momentum, on the verge of scoring, Lavonte David forces a fumble of Tyrone Tracy, takes the ball away from the Giants, keeping them at 0 points. That was another huge play. So only 5 tackles in this one from Lavonte David, but they were all critical tackles. He was another one that was bringing a lot of pressure into the backfield on Tommy DeVito, forcing him out of his spot, forcing him to throw the ball away. Just an absolutely phenomenal performance by Lavonte, and he has now played in the 3rd most games in Bucs history, trailing only Derek Brooks and Rondé Barber. So kudos to Lavonte in that one. Game ball number 2 for the offensive side. It's Baker Mayfield, 24 of 30. That's an 80% completion percentage. Throws for 294 yards. No passing touchdowns, so he still trails Joe Burrow and Lamar Jackson in that category. But he added another rushing touchdown. He did it with some intensity. He celebrated with a little of the Tommy Cutlets, and he still leads the NFL in total touchdowns this season. He has 3 rushing touchdowns this year, and he has been absolutely fantastic. Baker Mayfield also has 52 passing touchdowns since week 1 of the 2023 season. That is the most in the NFL over that span. He made plays with his arms. He made plays with his legs. He got beat up a little bit, even with some friendly fire, but continued to be that dude for the Bucs. And as I said to Lakita in the chat, that play where he's racing down the field to be a blocker for Bucky Irving, that right there is why Buccaneers fans love him. That right there is why he has endeared himself to this fan base, because you're not going to find another quarterback in the NFL that's going to do that. The only one that I think might do that would be Josh Allen, but even then, it's just not something you see where your quarterback is outrunning everybody down the field to try to block for your running back and spring him free for a huge touchdown. You love that kind of stuff from Baker Mayfield, and that's why he is so beloved. And then game ball number 4, I'm giving it to Antoine Winfield Jr. He's my second best defensive player in this one, and he looked more like his old self in this game. He was flying all over the field. He had a sack. He had a pass breakup, tackle for loss, created another sack with his blitz that forced DeVito essentially right into the arms of Kalijah Kancey. He was playing really well. Finished with 6 tackles. That was the 3rd most on the team in this game, and he did so by going back to that similar role that he played last year. Hopefully Whitehead's injury isn't too serious so that trend can continue, but this was the closest to 2023 Antoine that we have seen this season, outside of that one play where he forced the fumble of Kyle Pitts that was still ruled a touchdown. I will forever be baffled by that. But I loved what I saw from Antoine and the impact that he had, not necessarily for himself, but for the players around him in this defensive performance. So Antoine gets my second defensive game ball. Let's go and see who you guys are giving the game ball to. Matt says the golden game ball is Baker. I can understand it. I can. The attitude, the moxie. Isaiah Simmons made him mad earlier in the game. Kayvon Thibodeau with the cheap shot on him, and he was taking off and making plays with his legs. He was getting hyped up. I 100% understand that pick, but I can't give it to Baker over Bucky, not with Bucky's performance. And then Matt also says defensive game ball goes to Kancey. Kancey was this close. It was a toss-up for me between him, Antoine, and Vita. I had to rule out Vita because Vita also played on offense, and so I didn't know where to put him. And I think Antoine's overall impact was a little bit more than what Kalijah Kancey did. Demon Hunter also saying Kalijah Kancey gets my get out of jail free game ball. Destined for Greatness says James is back to 100 with the wrapping things up. The cold is all but gone, so my throat isn't as bad as it has been the past week and a half. I can sustain that a little bit too, or a little bit longer like I used to. Let's see. I saw somebody mention Justin School getting a game ball. I respect that too. Talked about School earlier in this show. He played really, really well. Paul, aka OG Baker Bro, says Baker Mayfield is him. Say it with me, chat room. 100%. Baker Mayfield is absolutely him. We got Rick Dog says the whole team deserves a game ball plus a bonus for the offensive line. The offensive line was great in this one. Baker was not sacked a single time in this game, even without Tristan Wirfs out there. Hopefully Tristan is ready to roll against the Carolina Panthers. But as I mentioned, when Tristan was listed as questionable, they said he was going to be kind of a game time decision, that the Bucs can win this game without Tristan Wirfs. Wirfs was not going to make or break a game against the New York Giants. Going to be a little bit tougher of a test against the Carolina Panthers if Wirfs isn't out there. But, this was a winnable game without Tristan Wirfs. And to be honest, they could have gone without Mike Evans and still been able to win this one. Baker Mayfield found 11 different receivers in this game, just spread the ball all over the place. Bucky was the biggest beneficiary, but overall, just a phenomenal performance from top to bottom on both sides of the football. The only really kind of bad thing that we saw was a botched handoff from Baker to Rachaad and then a missed extra point from Chase McLaughlin. I'm going to blame the extra point on the wind. The wind was nasty inside MetLife. It was swirling around. That's one of those stadiums where they had those wind gusts of 30 plus miles an hour. And the way that stadium is designed, that once that wind comes in the tunnel, it starts swirling. So you never really get a good feel for it on those windy days. But other than that, it was pretty much a flawless performance from this Buccaneers team. All right. Let's see. We got Joel says, give Cohen a game ball. I can dig it. I can 100% dig it. And then last one, because we got to get out of here. Edwin says, I will agree with Rick. The whole team deserves a game ball. I'm not going to veto that. I love it. You know me, I got to pick my two on both sides. But if you guys in the chat are giving game balls to the entire team, I am here for it. That is going to do it for this episode of Locked On Bucs. Please check out everything going on Twitter at Locked On Bucs, at @JYarcho_Bucs. Make sure you're subscribed on YouTube with those notifications turned on so you know every time I go live. Subscribe on your favorite podcast platforms. Become a Locked On Bucs insider. Get to one-on-one text with me. I always blow up everybody's phones during games talking about all kinds of things, including my irrational hatred for CBS broadcasts. But you can do so by going to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnBucs or click the link in the show notes. Hope you all have an absolutely outstanding Victory Monday. Stay safe, stay healthy, fire the cannons. Want to thank you so much for joining me right here on Locked On Bucs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.